Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. This is The Hunt, the name of that song. The hunt is not for the dark, but the shadows to be integrated. Within every living being there is a light and a shadow. The shadow has the propensity to operate with and within the dark, and we at THI are the shadow hunters. As we view their world in an increasingly upside down view, where everything is ass backwards, bizarre and downright ugly, stepping back and observing becomes a necessity as things get more bizarre by the hour in their world. Now, in a week where Tank says we are bringing the world together for those who are wishing to save the world, but we have drawn a line on one group who have an alternative agenda, which is suggestive that the THI group is not about changing the world, and also in a week where listeners who questioned the security of the app based on Tank and Kim's own words, that questioning by people with genuine concerns has now deemed us all at THI, and in some cases Life Force members, as, quote, rogue elements, unquote. All in his own words. But since when has asking genuine questions and supplying ideas for their group, plus discourse from some of our members to help them, is that deemed as rogue elements? The irony of a former RV guy and drug-pushing salesman accusing good people of being rogue elements is not lost on me. This is not the way forward for a genuine news channel formed by the people, and currently, whilst promoting and stating extraordinary things, it is all too similar to the mainstream media of divide and conquer. The fickleness of people is extraordinary, of how you can go from the person who is a vastly underestimated help in April to now being deemed as a rogue element of society 4 months later, is in and of itself extraordinary. People in their group, not ours, complaining of comments being deleted and questions being ignored, has zero to do with me, but I'm not sure how any group can progress in that manner. It's all too predictable and all very disappointing in equal measure. Jackass Awards this week go to several people and bodies. Following the announcements from the World Health Organization, more better known as the World Horror Organization, that the COVID-19 pandemic may be around for 2 more years, unlike the World Horror Organization, whilst creating a 53-page document issued on how to respond to vocal vaccine deniers. I guess they're losing the narrative. But why read or study a 53-page document only for the vaccine denier to go and tell them F off bot is both classic and hilarious in equal measure. In Tennessee, Sharon Hurt, a Nashville City Council member, proposed that if someone passes the coronavirus to another person and it kills them, then that person who passed the virus should be tried for murder or attempted murder. Pity they don't apply that for retards, isn't it? However, the City Council cannot create criminal legislation, only the state legislature can, and it would be impossible to prove who transmitted the virus. Except you can't. In Wisconsin, nice to see Mr. Trump sent National Guard out to protect one of our members today. And the Department of Natural Resources Secretary Preston Cole advised employees to wear a mask to participate in a virtual meeting on video conference calls where they could be seen by others. In Maine, Democrat Governor Janet Mills issued a guideline option for restaurant servers to wear an inverted face shield similar to a plastic cone of shame for dogs that is fitted at the neck and is open at the top instead of a mask. Trinity Metro in Fort Worth, Texas has installed ROSA, R-O-S-A, a robot that can detect when people are not wearing face masks. Now, the CEO of that company said his mind was blown by how many more people are complying with wearing masks when a machine tells them to do it. Oh dear. He also said that sales are increasing as businesses are bracing for the possibility they'll have to enforce COVID-19 safety measures for, quote, years to come, unquote. Well, here come the eventual police replacement system our show warned about a long time back. But what are the implications of this? Can you knock over the bot and tell it to shut up? What are the legal implications of forceful interactions? Under what authority or law does this machine operate? Is it constitutional? Does it contain facial recognition and database records of all people? And lastly, is it armed? Extra special Jackass Award of the Week goes to Antifa and the Black Lives Matter groups for the statements made this week by them now promise violent retaliation to anyone who says all lives matter. All lives matter. They always did. Yet these same people have the audacity to label one other group supremacists. I guess irony is far too high on the intelligence scale for those people to comprehend, it seems. Throw in the Portal people for their reporting on Wisconsin, on the second shootings, and making a crime now into a political label infraction, it all gets very desperate and shallow thinking reporting, it seems. Here. Right, let's get into some news from around the world as we normally do, and we're going to start with US prosecutors are preparing to charge Teva, T-E-V-A, Pharmaceutical Industries Limited, with conspiring with competitors to raise prices for generic drugs. And the Justice Department is planning to charge them as soon as Tuesday after the company rebuffed the settlement that would have required paying a criminal penalty and admitting wrongdoing, said the person. Now, Teva's US traded shares fell as much as 6% on the news and were down to 2.3% to $9.41 on Tuesday in New York. Now, the charges against Teva, who are currently the world's largest generic drug maker by market value, would mark the most significant case to come out of the Justice Department's years-long investigation into allegations that companies conspired with one another to prop up prices of certain widely used medications. Cartel is the name. Now, 9 of every 10 prescription drugs dispensed in the US are generics. 5 other companies have settled charges and agreed to pay a total of $426 million in criminal penalties. But the great question I want to ask, and I'm sure you all do as well, is where did that $426 million go to? the people who are robbed blind by this company's cheating? No, and therein lies a deeper problem. With every purchase tracked now, they could quite easily have gone through the database and reimbursed the purchasers based on their quantity of buying with a rebate. And this criminal penalty issue has all the hallmarks of money harvesting and in some ways laundering. Now, the Chief Executive Officer, Kurt Schultz, said in an interview that Teva didn't engage in price fixing and that the company was prepared to fight any charges. He said the company wouldn't agree to an accord that could limit the company's liability to sell products in the US, and the Justice Department's Antitrust Division, which is conducting the investigation, has offered Teva a settlement known as a deferred prosecution agreement, according to a person familiar with the matter. Now, such resolutions suspend charges but require a company to admit wrongdoing and then cooperate in the investigation. But Teva told the government it would only accept a non-prosecution agreement that doesn't require the drug maker to admit wrongdoing. Nobody likes to admit doing wrong these days, it seems. Now, admitting to wrongdoing would expose Teva to a potentially costly settlement in pending civil litigation against the company tied into the price fixing allegations. Investors have long aired their concerns about Teva's mounting legal exposure in both the generic price fixing probes as well as the separate suits alleging the company played a major role in the opioid epidemic. Oops. Now, it is said Teva is strapped for cash as it attempts to reduce its more than $26 billion debt load. And in October, the company offered to settle thousands of opioid lawsuits in the US through a $250 million payment, along with a donation of drugs valued at $23 billion. Experts have said a settlement is still years away, and that the offering of a drug donation is a means for the company to avoid a hefty cash payment. Now, Schultz told investors earlier this month that Teva's liabilities remain difficult to model, though Teva will do its best to avoid insurmountable financial damage. Now, in addition to the US case, Teva and other generic drug makers are grappling with civil lawsuits from a nationwide group of state attorneys general that accuse the companies of colluding to rig prices of drugs and allocate customers. And one of the lawsuits portrays Teva as a masterminding a conspiracy with competitors that led to inflated prices on more than 100 different drugs. So Teva and the Sackler family were both involved in the opioid crisis, and both are Jewish-based. Just saying. UK now, serious financial issues going on there, and some families have had to abandon balanced meals for lack of money during this fake virus crisis, while many have faced physical and mental problems, according to a report this week. And researchers from a Child Poverty Action Group and the Church of England spoke to parents who said they've been forced to sell possessions to protect their children's quality of life, and found that 80% of poorer families surveyed felt they had become worse off financially since the lockdown began. Now, the findings underline the disproportionate strain being placed on the poorest households as the UK struggles to deal with the pandemic. And in June, the Resolution Foundation said that while many low-income families were turning to credit cards to get by under lockdown, many higher-income households were able to save more money as their costs fell. The researchers found that costs had gone up for many low-income families, and many of whom were having to spend more on food and utilities than before. Meanwhile, many had lost work either as a direct result of the lockdown or the loss of support such as childcare. And the Child Poverty Action Group said it had found many children who were eligible for free school meals in England had not been receiving them. And it called on the government to extend the scheme to all families in receipt of universal credit, which sounds eerily like universal basic income, or working tax credit, with a view to bringing in universal free school meals for all children in the long term. And the charity said ministers should also increase child benefit by £10 a week and add an extra £10 a week to the child element within universal credit and child tax credits, and also abolish the benefit cap, or at least suspend it for the duration of the pandemic. Back to the US. The Democratic-led House on Saturday passed legislation preventing the US Postal Service cutbacks at least through January and providing it with a $25 billion in additional funding, reflecting Democrats' concerns that delivery delays affecting basic mail service would spill over into an election being held during the pandemic. Now, in a rare Saturday session held during August recess, the bill passed 257 to 150 with the support of 231 Democrats and also 26 Republicans. It was opposed by 149 Republicans and 1 independent. Now, the non-speaking House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, brought the measure to the floor over the objections of House Republican leaders. They say she is promoting conspiracy theories that Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who is a major Trump donor appointed to the position in May, is cutting costs at the financially struggling service to hinder voting by mail, which President Trump has criticised. Let's go back on that a bit. They're stating that the Postmaster General is cutting costs at the financially struggling service. Well, if people are struggling financially, surely the first thing you would do is to cut costs. Or you can do what Keeping Up with the Joneses programme does and keep borrowing and creating debt. Now, representatives of the Post Office have repeatedly stated that they do not need money and will not make changes. And that was tweeted by Mr. Trump on Saturday. And he said this is all another hoax by the Democrats to give $25 billion unneeded dollars for political purposes without talking about the universal mail-in ballot scam that they are trying to pull off in violation of everything our country stands for. Does anyone ask why the Democrats are so interested in mailboxes all of a sudden? Or that they would have a special session and wish to push through funds for mailboxes, and yet they won't do it for the people. All American people should see right through that and cut out the party politics. It's the same coin, two different heads. they can delay all stimulus money. Any money that goes to the public, it's delay, 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 delay. On both sides, they're no different. But we need money for mailboxes. Here, have 25 billion. But won't give the people stimulus checks because of their ridiculous policies. Just saying. Argentina is extending a price freeze for TV, internet and mobile services until the end of the year, deeming them essential public services and imposing the types of controls that could complicate a deal with the International Monetary Fund. And the freeze means providers won't be able to raise prices going forward without government approval, according to a statement that was sent out on Friday. Now, prices on those items have been frozen since May, with the ban set to expire at the end of this month. Now, following months of wrangling, Argentina clinched a deal with investors in early August to renegotiate $65 billion in debt after its ninth default, which is deliberate, as we all know. Now, amid what's expected to be the deepest economic contraction ever, the South American country has to win back the confidence of its global markets. Inflation is running at 42% annually, and the nationwide lockdown to curb COVID-19 deepened the economic contraction. Now, Argentina has also already frozen prices on 2,000 consumer goods it also deemed essential, unlike America then, where the cost of meat has gone through the roof. I'm sure you've all noticed, and many other food items. And they say, as we face the restrictions the pandemic imposes on us, nobody should have to give up part of their income to cover price hikes on those services, according to President Alberto Fernandez. And he said, we're guaranteeing access for everyone. Now, his government has banned layoffs, doubled severance pay, and implemented various currency controls. And the decree was published Saturday. Now, Ferdinand's populist stance on telecom prices contrasts with recent comments by the Economy Minister Martin Guzman, who had hinted the country may move towards removing strict capital controls and would also seek to renegotiate its payments to the IMF. And he said it will be hard to reconcile the insistence on this type of measure with the typical conditions embedded in IMF deals. Mr. Fernandez and the Argentine government need to drop the IMF altogether, as does every other country. They are a financial terrorist organisation that deliberately engages countries to increase their debt base, then demand portions of the country and or assets to pay off fraudulent debts. Now, Argentina, like all other countries, has assets accumulating within the trust and would not require loans or refinancing via the IMF. But they need to remove the Operation Condor elements within their country. It's that time of the year again, and this is about to happen. Well, you're all going to die. An asteroid has a slim chance of putting us out of our misery on November the 2nd, as it heads towards Earth one day before the US election, named 2018 VP1. and the asteroid is fairly tiny, with an estimated diameter of 6 feet to 10 feet. So it's similar in size to the social distancing scam, is it? Perhaps it will social distance Earth, given the banality of so many exhibit these days. Now, it's said it's only a 0.41% likely to actually impact the Earth, according to Clown News Network, but celestial objects at that size also tend to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere anyway, according to Never Straight Answer. So 2018 VP1 has had a few close encounters with Earth before, dating back to 1970, and it last visited in November of 2018, roughly when it was discovered at California's Palomar Observatory, and it's also due back after a 2-year orbit around the Sun to come within 4,826,000 miles of our atmosphere. The debasement of the dollar continues, according to a recent piece this week, and it's labelling China is the main threat for that to get even worse. And the conflict with China is by far one of the single biggest threats to the US dollar. So it's worth paying attention to, they say, because as the last Cold War proved, it can escalate rapidly and persist for decades. But there is another threat to the dollar, according to this report, that is being developed on America's own shores and by our own central bank. It's not our central bank, it never was. Just 6 months ago, the idea of a centralized digital currency in the US was discussed by officials as a mere plan. It wasn't. We warned of it over a year ago. Although I suspect the injection of funds into the Fed in March has escalated that prospect much. Where those funds came from remains a source of debate. But suddenly it was pushed forward an awful lot quicker. Now, the Fed Governor, Lael Brainard, went as far as to admit that it could eventually replace the dollar. Brainard, who was born in Germany and has frequented all rogue enterprises like Harvard, MIT, Council of Foreign Relations, Brookings Institute, so not expecting her to do much of validity for him by the people then. But fast forward to today, and in a speech titled An Update on Digital Currencies, Brainard is now suggesting that the plan could materialise sooner than they had ever led us to believe. From the speech, we get an idea of how far the Fed's plan has come, which is stated to be now in the experimentation phase of development. And any time the federal government creates or gets involved in a major system, the results are almost always bad or ineffective. They've meddled with Social Security, no, they've looted it. Jeopardised retirement savings, no, they looted it. Even messed up a very important registration website for the Affordable Care Act, deliberate. Now the Fed is taking on the payment system at the root of everything. Once anything like FedCoin gets implemented, the report says, it could replace the dollar, and Americans will be a short step away from a cashless society. Oh my. Now, Robert Wenzel offered a strong warning about the current update from Brainard's speech in a recent blog, and he said the update is not good news for private advocates who don't want to see all their money transactions tracked by the government. There is little doubt that such a digital Fed money will have the capability to track all transactions, which is why I'm concerned about apps on a certain other website. Newsflash for those who wrote that report, they've been tracking all our purchases outside of cash for quite some time, via the chips in credit and debit cards. Where are we next? Now this is a wider story on a part that we mentioned earlier, that the main state government has upset residents after an order mandating now that restaurant staff wear face shields upside down, attached at the collar, which people dubbed cones of shame, more befitting a family pet. And the latest COVID-19 prevention checklist issued by the Democratic Governor Janet Mills lays out a series of rules one might expect amid the pandemic, such as good hygiene and social distancing. But one guideline for restaurants has raised eyebrows, demanding that servers don collared face shields reminiscent of those fixed to dogs after a medical procedure. So we've gone from sheep to dogs now. Front of the house staff may wear a face shield in lieu of a face covering only if the shield is designed to be worn inverted, attaching below the face, example as a collar, and open at the top of the shield with the shield extending above the eyes and laterally to the ears, according to the guidelines. The face shields are open at the bottom, directing breath downward, are not acceptable replacements for face coverings for front house staff. Now, while the rule only applies to those who decline to wear a typical face mask, netizens have hounded the Mills administration over the outlandish guideline, mocking the collared shields as demeaning cones of shame. And there was a series of Twitter tweets. Let me guess, Governor Mills is a Democrat. Dog cones for the people. And we call that the cone of shame in our house because my dog hates it. Imagine how people feel wearing this stupid thing. This has zero to do with COVID now. I've noticed that the portal people are not rushing to tell you how downgraded the figures are, which means a rolling back of the measures, or it should do, in a common sense world. But their world is not based in common sense, just retardedness. And what this is all about is demeaning the people and making them look ridiculous, whilst they are immune from wearing them, remember. Politicians, police and government officials, according to them, are immune from COVID because they don't wear masks. And at which point do the masses see this for what it is? It's a giant piss take out of the public by their own representatives. My suggestion is for demonstrations outside this woman's home until she steps down. Back to the UK. Is it safe to go back to school was the big question this week. And the Prime Minister says failure to reopen is not an option, as the UK's chief medical officers tell parents their children can return to classrooms next month as they face an exceptionally small risk from COVID. So on the one hand, they're telling you you face an exceptionally small risk, but on the other hand, we're all on heightened alert. DEFCON 5, let's wear even more ridiculous masks. Which is it to be? And the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said failure to reopen schools next month is not an option. And the highly unusual consensus statement from the country's most senior experts removes the final hurdle to the resumption of full-time teaching in September, to the relief of parents who have been forced to homeschool the majority of children since March. Meanwhile, a Whitehall source said Downing Street had made it clear there can be no ifs, no buts in delivering on the national priority. They said the fatality rate for children aged 5 to 15 who become infected was just 14 in a million, which is lower than for most seasonal flu infections. And while every death of a child is a tragedy, they said, almost all deaths from COVID are in children with significant pre-existing health conditions. One has to ask, is this a genetic virus? Ponder on that. Now, the experts report that just 1 in 1,000 children under 9 who show COVID symptoms would need hospital treatment, a figure that rises to 3 in 1,000 for 10 to 19-year-olds. And that is still an order of magnitude lower than the 4% rate for the general population. And the experts added, most of these children will make a rapid recovery. Well, there you have it, more Drake-style shows of contradicting their own contradictions. Nobody seems to know the answer. One says one says the other. Would you want to know the real reason why they are desperate to get children back into school? Because they're learning too much outside of it is why. So let's get children back into the fear-based classrooms and indoctrinate them further, is what they're up to. Now, parents should demand no child of theirs returns to school until the masks in their state or country are removed permanently, as only then is it deemed safe to do so. And if they think this virus is so bad to require masks at most times, even driving alone in your own car, and to the people who do that, you do realise you look a jackass, don't you? Just saying. So whilst masks remain, the threat of the virus remains, according to them. And so parents then have the right to say no school for their children and can then use their Ouroboros programme against them. Still in the UK, and this is a warning. Boris Johnson has blamed a mutant algorithm for this summer's exam results fiasco. They were all wrong. And he said, I'm afraid your grades were almost derailed by a mutant algorithm, and I know how stressful that must have been, who told pupils out of school in Leicestershire this week. Replacement grades caused chaos and required changes to some results. And in the fallout from the exam problems, the Department for Education Permanent Secretary has stepped down. Now, the National Education Union called Mr. Johnson's comments brazen and accused the Prime Minister of trying to idly shrug away a disaster that his own government created. No, try MI5. Just saying. The Prime Minister previously described the controversial exam results as a robust set of grades. And Mr. Johnson had been empathising with the problems of young people during the pandemic, including the mutant algorithm for exam grades problem. But mutant algorithms does and has not just applied to UK exam results. Does it, intelligence agencies? And what it does, it steers internet traffic, and search engines are probably the most used of the mutant algorithms. Back to America, and we're still in schools. A Tennessee school district is now under fire for asking parents to sign a form agreeing to not eavesdrop on kids' virtual classes over concerns they could overhear confidential information. Let me just repeat that. A Tennessee school district is under fire for asking parents to sign a form agreeing to not eavesdrop on kids' virtual classes over concerns they could overhear confidential information. Now, after a significant pushback, Rutherford County Schools is allowing parents to tune in with permission from the teacher, but they cannot record the classes. Really? It's ridiculous. It's so hypocritical, because they've been data mining our children for years. Compliments of Common Core, according to Laurie Cardoza-Moore, who's the founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, who stated that on Fox and Friends Weekend on Saturday. What are they trying to hide? What is the problem? Why won't they let us sit in? The homeschool mum of 5 asked. Now, obviously, because they are teaching our children propaganda that they should not be teaching, she said, and they are trying to socialise our children. She added, "We have had a major problem in education, not just here in Tennessee, but across the country, where they are indoctrinating our children with pro-pagan dogma." And Cardoza-Moore questioned why the school would encourage parents to snitch on one another, and what would happen if a parent violates the waiver. Does that mean somebody from the school district is going to knock on my door and pull my kid out of my home, his virtual classroom, she asked? Or is it going to be my tax dollars that fund my child's public education, and my child won't get to participate in education because of it? And what this story confirms is what this show has stated all along. They have been indoctrinating our children from day one, from the 1930s onwards. And with parents more aware now due to this scandemic, now they don't wish to allow parents to listen in. What is confidential information that can only be told to a child but not its parent? One has to ask. Why are we sending our kids to these places? They've just proven us right again. So another so-called conspiracy theory bites the dust and becomes fact. President Trump announced on Sunday that the Food and Drug Administration had authorized convalescent plasma for emergency use to treat patients sickened by the novel coronavirus. Now, Trump, who has been looking to announce progress in fighting the virus, touted the news as a historic breakthrough at a White House news conference on Sunday, saying it would dramatically expand access to this treatment. Experts have expressed optimism about the treatment, but the former FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb, called the move incremental earlier on Sunday, noting that convalescent plasma is already available to thousands of patients, though the new announcement might make it more widely available. Now, the move also comes amid concerns about political pressure from Trump on the FDA and whether the agency is authorizing the treatment prematurely without adequate data about how well it works. Now, I think the Life Force group thought Trump's comments on FDA and new treatments was about the biotech machine. But with this story and the timing of it, it appears to not be the case. Two men accused of planning an anti-lockdown protest in Melbourne, Australia, have had their homes raided and have been arrested. Police vowed to crack down on the protest planned in Melbourne's CBD on Sunday, calling it a blatant breach of COVID-19 restrictions. Officers seized phones and a computer and charging a 41-year-old Rule Barkman with incitement. So a 41-year-old Churnside Parkman is also expected to be charged on Friday. Now, the Facebook event has called on people to protest in opposition to the city's 6-week shutdown and claimed to be a broader movement of planned protests. And the quote on the Facebook page says, "Let's blow this one up and fill the streets to show these criminals we won't give up our country and livelihoods without a fight," the event description read. And it had more than 100 confirmed attendees and 400 expressions of interest late on Thursday evening. Now, if they turn up, the Victoria Police said it wouldn't hesitate to hand out fines on the spot of $1,652 and or arrest protesters. And it said this is a completely blatant breach of the Chief Health Officer's directions and puts Victorian lives at risk, the police said. Jackassery puts lives at risk. Retardedness also. Just saying. As they carry on reporting the number of cases growing, 471 new ones on Thursday, which is probably a lie, so too do the number of fines. A glimpse into a future world, that is, unless it's stopped. Made more possible with technology. Just replace live cops with drones and bots. You don't like their rules, then instant credits removed from your account with no recourse. Credits of sorts will replace money in their technology world. The federal government appears to have backtracked on COVID-19 testing guidance. Oops. According to a statement released last Wednesday from the director of the CDC, Centre for Disease Control and Prevention. Perhaps they should enlist themselves as part of the disease, and we should prevent them. Now, controversial recommendations posted to the CDC website on Monday suggested people exposed to the coronavirus, quote, do not necessarily need a test, unquote, unless they're having symptoms, are older, or are otherwise medically vulnerable. And in the new statement, the CDC's director, Robert Redfield, now says that all close contact of confirmed or probable COVID patients may consider testing. Mr. Redfield appears to have walked back from that a little bit, said Dr. William Schaffner, an infectious disease expert at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. He said, I think this is a black eye for the CDC. They've got materials on their website that really can't be scientifically justified, said the former CDC, Dr. Tom Friedman, who is now the president of Resolve to Save Lives, which is a global public health initiative. Oops. We're still on virus. Here's an interesting piece. This was a part of a small report from a science doctor, a leading science doctor. And he said it was important enough that he wanted to get it out immediately due to his research into the NCBI database for nucleotide sequences has led to a stunning discovery. And one of the World Horror Organization's primer sequences in the PCR test for the SARS-CoV-2 virus is actually found in all human DNA. Oops. The sequence, which is a series of C's, T's and G's, but there's no A in it, is an 18-character primer sequence found in the World Health Organization coronavirus PCR testing protocol document. And the primer sequences are what gets amplified by the PCR process in order to be detected and designated a positive test result. And it just so happens, it's a coincidence again, this exact same 18-character sequence verbatim is also found on Homo sapiens chromosome 8. And he said, as far as I can tell, this means that the World Health test kits should always find a positive result in all humans. And he said, I really can't overstate the significance of this finding. At minimum, it should have a notable impact on test results. There goes all your test kits. Refuse point blank to have a test. You don't know what they're putting on those swabs. Just saying. A lot of those test kits, courtesy of the showroom wax dummy Jared Kushner and FEMA and Gavin Newsom, came from China. You know, those bad enemies that are always attacking America, and also India, home of the Kali Ma. Last piece before we go into a music break. A group of doctors this week made good points that echo the warnings I gave in our show many months back. And it also serves as a reminder of what we face by complying. Now, the doctors Michael Leatherman, Maxwell J. Mailman and Stuart Youngner put out this summary of the end game of this pandemic. And yes, it all fits. 1. Vaccines should be mandatory. 2. No religious or personal objections to receiving the shot or shots should be honoured. 3. Harsh penalties should be adopted to pressure the populace to comply, including 4. Tax penalties, higher insurance premiums, and denial of many government and private services for the unvaccinated. 5. Refusal of private businesses to serve or employ the unvaccinated. 6. Refusal of schools to allow unvaccinated children to attend classes. 7. Exclusion by public and commercial transit companies, airlines, trains and buses of the unvaccinated. 8. Requiring by public and private auditoriums of evidence of immunisation for entry. A registry of immunisation would be needed with names entered after immunisation is completed. People who receive the vaccine should be issued certification cards with expiration dates. These certifications could actually be embedded in the skin of individuals. A person would be injected with a bit of dye that's invisible to the naked eye but easily seen with a special cell phone filter. Or each person would need to present their papers to use any or virtually all restricted services. The papers, please. You know, if they want to do that, fine. But I think it's about time we really separated the two worlds and create states for non-bot people. They want to go ahead and inject themselves like drug addicts and wear masks. Go and put them in designated states and let common sense people with critical thinking live together on their own, away from jackass society people. America, the Fourth Reich is not a future event. It's not dystopian and all that rubbish that they put out. It's been happening here for the last 70 years. 70 years is the reboot time period for old programs. 1940s becomes the 2010s. And the creeping back in of the term known as Nazi. Now you are starting to see it in your face. Next stop, food rationing. Oh, that's already started as well. As a reminder, Nazis are by and large not German. They are and always were the Zionists, regardless of nationality, although many of them are Jewish Hebrew, and subsequently connected to or running Anunnaki anti-human programs. And one has to wonder what the Earth Ambassador is doing about that at this point. Fourth Reich would never happen here. It already has. Indeed. Following last week's piece on the two most prevalent alt media groups, the Q Group and Lightforce, I've decided to do a roundup of their news this week. And Q posted panic in DC again as something being different when it's been panic for near 4 years. He also posted the term fifth column. Again, this is nothing new. The reality is the entire governmental structure in this country has been fifth column to the American people since a minimum of 1871. Now, Kim, in her news, mentioned a new general within the White House and claims 70 of the deep state actors have been removed, which is great stuff. And she also resent the fulcrum files again this week of all the dirty laundry on all the politicians and various entities connected to the government. Now, one hopes that this time it is used appropriately and actions are taken accordingly, which was not the case with the previous deliveries of those documents. Kim also, 8 weeks after claiming she eliminated all student debt, 6 weeks after she was rebuked on her show because they returned after being suspended for 3 to 4 months due to the CARE Act, now claims to have eliminated student loans again this week as a favour, and in return for giving the government $1.47 trillion in exchange for paying off all student loans. Now, other stipulations Kim and her team made was the conditions of funding, was that the mandatory vaccines had to be removed from the stimulus bill, and that the stimulus checks to the people must be added in. Now, that is a great move. And Kim stated there was a guarantee from Mr. Trump that he would announce at the end of student loans by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday afternoon. As of writing this on Wednesday, no announcement was forthcoming. Kim claimed that the Clintons transferred all the child trafficking and pedo stuff over to KPMG servers recently, which is odd given they were on the KPMG system when Kim accessed it around February, and saw for herself the crimes committed and content, and also the evidence of the Team Bubba's group involvement in pedophilia and child trafficking as well at the same time. Now, the Team Bubba leader is linked to the DNC via a child exploitation ring, and how many others in that group are connected to it remains unknown at this point, or whether the sex porn server issues that brought up several leading alt media personalities, which is also tied to the DNC, is also unknown at this point as well. Kim then claims that the KPMG was now shut down and that this will lead to progress going forward. As of yesterday, the KPMG website and servers were still operational. We received no update on the progress of the enforcement unit and the subsequent arrests we all look forward to. We got no answers to the questions we posed last week, although it was suggested that they would do a Q&A section early next month. For those who have noted a certain repeat loop reverse time jump pattern to the content of their shows, yes, I see that, and yes, we will watch it closely. Now, the key portion of the show this weekend is Kim and Tank claimed that they have FDA approval for a healing machine, which is in and of itself great news. It's much needed. But at this point, I'm exercising caution, not because of life force, but due to the several claims of others in the alt media circles like Keenan, Kesh, and others claiming their machines will do this, that, and the other, and yet to date none of them have come to fruition on any public-wide basis. And the same will apply to the cosmic tower that is being brought forward by Harold Tiers. It requires deeper thinking on any potential side effects, or can it be weaponized in some way against the people? That is my only concern. Is it 100% beneficial to the people, and does it have or any potential side effects? So just because Harold is connected to our group, I will still question Harold with the same vigour as anyone or anything else, before I get accused of just attacking one group again. But I am hoping this one can break through and help the public, provided it does what it says in the claims made and has no side effects. So the machines were stated to cost $25,000 each, and Kim said she would buy them to put them in medical centres on behalf of the trust. Now, the session costs are said to be $250 per session, although it was stated in the show a general physician would only charge $100 an hour. I'm not sure why the discrepancy. Maybe it's snake oil salesman again. But Tank states that the medical insurance should cover it, but was kind of unsure if that was the case. Now, one of the questions posed by their follower and not answered by Lifeforce Yes is, please explain the interfacing connections and how the quantum aspect and how it comes into play. And also, what does it change or modify inside of a person's body? Because if it's going to change our being into a different or controllable person, then I don't want it. There were similar concerns raised within the comments section, and that pleases me as people are thinking more and better. For too long now, we've just accepted the narrative on a plethora of things and not looked at the potential kickbacks. It's a bit like universal basic income. It sounds all fantastic, free money. But nothing comes free in this world, not with clowns in charge. And we don't look at the potential kickbacks, the weaponization of it, or any side effects. So I started doing my own research of a similar, or it may even be the actual device, because it was not stated who the company was in the show. And it consists of an electronic frequency style box, a cable that hooks into your laptop or computer, and a head brace with wrist and ankle straps which you attach to the person and then hook it into the computer to interface and interact with. Now, at the risk of being called a rogue element again, I would like to raise my concerns about this. Because if your computer contains viruses or programs Can this not be interfered with on a computer level? Can it send rogue frequencies to interfere with people and endanger the people using it? With GoOgle, NSA and various other CIA-connected entities all hooked into and controlling our computers, one feels our computers, and there are phone models for this as well, would have to be made 100% clean before we hook into this machine in this manner. And one has to ask, is the CIA now going CAI? So let's run a scenario, shall we? This machine initially starts to work and it goes viral. The medical giants start to lose vast amounts of money. What happens next? In come their kickback funds to computer tech people, like Palo Alto, to create a program that kicks in every time someone uses or starts using the healing machine program, and meddles not only with the program itself, but the people using it. Sound valid? One other thing that I was tweaked into a pondering whilst writing this was the Montauk chair, where people were strapped in a chair, bound by straps and wires, and wore a head brace, and were then hooked into a machine. That was MK Ultra program. Is it possible the rogue elements of society suddenly turn all these machines into heightened versions of MK Ultra on people who are already weaker due to sickness? Does this scenario sound far-fetched? Or am I just being a killjoy? Or is it valid discussions required before we launch people into a potential disastrous scenario? You've got to remember, for many of you, a decade ago, you thought that the television was not a mind control device. You thought that school taught children, not indoctrinated them. You thought the government worked for the benefit of the people. You thought the justice system brings fair justice. You thought the government wouldn't poison food, water and air. You thought their drugs and vaccines were safe. You all thought wrong. And this is why we have to question things in a balanced and non-biased manner. Now, given the mention of the memory shift described in the show in relation to PTSD, which sounds like a switching of the alters within a person, in my opinion, which is not a cure, but a transference of the problem, and that should be made clear to people. Switching of alters may bring relief to one problem, but it can bring a whole heap of other problems as well. I know this all too well, having done work with several people with alters and attachments, and so I'm not speaking without knowledge here. These need to be addressed urgently before we launch into another piece of technology, virtually all of which to date have been weaponized against the people. Now, it can be seen as challenging or dismissing the life force channel, but that is a deflection, and the people require answers to valid questions posed. But I have posed issues to do with technology since I started broadcasting, and quite why now it is seen or deemed as a deliberate ploy or critique of one group remains a mystery to me. And to the many of you in THI and also the Life Force UNC members who have also contacted me with these concerns. We need to look very closely at all technology, all the pros. It's great listening to the pros. It's what we want to hear. But we have to evaluate the cons before we launch into anything. Now, due to people questioning both me and Kim again, here is a final statement on what did and what didn't happen. THI didn't pay Kim any funds. THI has no funds because THI is not a business. The TPC, the People's Club, didn't pay Kim any funds either. I'm going to repeat again for the hard of hearing. The People's Club did not pay Kim any funds out of the donations. The TPC has not paid me 1 cent, despite running over 95% of it myself in the last 4.25 years it has been running. And that is all anyone needs to know. All donations that were sent all went to the right cause or causes or destinations as requested by the donators. As for my Patreon and how I spend it or who I spend it on is frankly nobody else's business. Now, I want to thank all members far and wide who have and continue to donate to me to support my work, and also the TPC in what are difficult times for many. It is never forgotten or taken for granted, your generosity. Now, whilst we're on the same subject, this was brought up by one of our members this week who said this. This is something I've been researching for the past couple of years now, and bioresonance frequency testing and therapy. The long story short is it works and works fast. I spoke to this in the THI UK group meetings and even had the idea that all drug-pushing doctors should be replaced with bioresonance therapy, as it's much safer and a lot more effective than prescription medication. Now, to show I raise concerns with all of this and not just one group as stated, I then asked the member the question, so we replace all doctors and nurses with a machine. What do you do with all the doctors and nurses? And this is where I come in, as I look at things from an overview basis. And some people can think it's being critical or critiquing. It's not. It's widening the picture and covering all bases that this show is known for. All of us, at times, and this is including myself, too often get lured in and are focusing on the product, the funding, or the event, and not what happens next. Consequences of actions should always be considered, unless we wish to replicate the clowns or the borders programs. Now, I'm not dismissing healing tech per se, just to be clear. I'm not. But we have to fully investigate it first before launching into it. But I do find it interesting it comes up now as they're rolling out their tech control world. And it's something we all have to be aware and careful of and go beyond the sensational headlining. New genetic evidence came forward this week and suggests that just over 4 millennia ago, a group of Indian travellers landed in Australia and stayed. Now, the evidence emerged a few years ago, but it's now been formulated after a group of Aboriginal men's Y chromosomes matched with Y chromosomes typically found in Indian men. And up until now, the exact details have been unclear. But Irina Pugash from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology may have recently solved the 1,000-year-old case. And 4,000 years before the first fleet landed on Australian shores, Indian adventurers had already settled and were accepted into the indigenous Australian culture. By studying the single nucleotide polymorphisms and their patterns, Dr. Pugash revealed a diverse tapestry of ancestry, one different from the lineage of the New Guinean people or the Philippine people. Now, the study found a pattern of SNPs that is only found in Indian genetics, specifically the Dravidian speakers from South India. And Dr. Pugash's results were consistent with the Y chromosome data found years earlier, and using both results, she calculated exactly when India arrived in Australia. And Dr. Pugash estimated this to be around 2217 BC, and said to be an interesting time for both Australia and India, and Indian civilization was just about formed. That is a wrong statement, actually. It was fully formed in some aspects, particularly around the Garden of Eden in India. And Australian culture at the time and wildlife were rearranging. Now, the Indus Valley civilization, India, emerged between 2600 BC and 1900 BC. And during this period, Indus Valley managed to develop seaworthy boats, which they used to trade with their neighbours in the Middle East. And this new technology was used to get to Australia. And it said there is evidence of a shift in technology that coincides with the time Indians were thought to have arrived in Australia. Suddenly, indigenous Australians switched their Paleolithic crude stone tools for Neolithic refined tools. Interesting point. And this is confirmation of our From Russia with Love series, that the sub-grey race and the Kalimar followers thrown out of India did not just go to Egypt, but went north to Mongolia and then either across the Bering Strait, which they say was thousands of years ago, I don't think so, and into America and mixed with the Native American tribes, which is why they're called Indians. And also now veered both to Australia. And it is my belief that these people subsequently infected all other tribes globally via their DNA. And the reason I say infected is nothing to do with disease, but the dark force voodoo spirit prevalent in those peoples. They also taught other native tribes about sacrificing people and working for and with the dark forces, some of which reside within the spirit realms. Now, in other archaeological evidence of the Indians going to Egypt, they have now found that monkeys in Egypt, once thought to come from Africa, were actually from India, and in particular the rhesus monkey, which brings up a whole heap of ponderings given the rhesus negative connotations. I'll leave you to ponder on that. Right, where are we next? This week I received a proposal property tax bill for taxes payable in November, and observed something that people should be made aware of what is coming next. With revenues down everywhere and payments deferred and or stopped, this practice will creep in on the American public here on in as they make us pay for the stimulus checks and the virus bill. Now, the appraised taxes increase seems to be up 10% on all categories taxable within your property tax bill. This is despite providing no or reduced services this year across every state and county. With the report of 1/3 of mortgages foreclosed before fall and more by the end of the year, those costs will be increasingly be left payable by the few, and raises major concerns. But here is another of their harebrained plans they are putting forward now, and it adds weight to the warning I've given in previous shows about the universal basic income. An unconditional basic income is given to citizens of a country because they are citizens, not conditional upon other qualifications. Some people have suggested that a universal basic income would be a good way to eliminate poverty and deal with unemployment. A majority of the public in several countries support the introduction of an unconditional basic income, including France. Now, there have been basic income pilots done before that were conducted in the United States and Canada in the 1960s and 1970s. Also in Namibia from 2008 and India from 2011. Switzerland had a referendum on the topic in 2016 which rejected a UBI, and Finland and Spain were conducting trials as of 2018. Now, Iran was the first country to introduce a national basic income, and since autumn of 2010, it has paid an income to all citizens and replaced the decades-long system of subsidies for petrol, fuel, and other supplies. In 2012, the sum corresponded to about $40 per person per month. And with the coronavirus crisis and resultant economic struggles, it is rather likely for UBI to find even more acceptance in the societies of strongly affected nations, At the same time, it stands to reason that the unconditionality of it will be dropped, and a payout at one point in the future will be connected with compliance in receiving vaccinations to combat all current and up-and-coming viruses. That's the second warning in 2 reports. That echoes what I've been saying on the show. They're going to tie everything to your vaccination records. The 2080 Society, not many people will have heard of this, is a projected society for the 21st century. And 20% of the population, these think tank jackasses, will be enough to keep the world's economy going. The other 80% live on some form of welfare. So what is the 2080 Society? Well, it's a concept which has been discussed by Hans Peter Martin in his book The Global Trap, after he visited the Fairmont Convention that has taken place in 1995 in San Francisco. And he was one of 3 invited journalists at this conference, where he overheard global business leaders discussing how much or less workforce they actually need to keep their companies running. And the book is known for defining a possible 2080 society. And in this possible society of the 21st century, 20% of the working age population, they believe, will be enough to keep the world economy going, with the other 80% living on some form of welfare, while not explicitly mentioned. What this is talking about in 1995 was the universal basic income. And then what was said in the meeting or the conference, the 80% are then entertained with a concept called titty-tainment. Yes, you heard that right. Titty-tainment. A term uttered by Mr. Brzezinski, which aims at keeping the 80% of frustrated citizens happy with a mixture of deafeningly predictable, lowest common denominator entertainment for the soul and nourishment for the body. Streaming services like Netflix for movies and TV series abound, and a coming wave of full robotization have made this a very likely future scenario. Now, the Pareto Principle is a rule that defines that 20% of business activities will account for 80% of results or revenue. My questions are, what will the 20% think of that? Will that be another class system all over again? Will new labels be created for the 80%? Now, the problem these jackass think tank people faces with this is they've created, in the Western world at least, a society of everyone for themselves and I'm all right jack attitude. And so with so many people now looking after numero uno, how will those people who are now designated as the 20% feel about funding the other 80% now deemed idle? It's another classic case of Ouroboros programs by the clowns again, where the new program impacts and ruins the gains or ideals of the previous program. And it's jackassery on unprecedented levels. But who decides who is the 20 or 80%? Is it more government-style dictatorship? Will it be enforced? Who enforces it? Are we talking robot armies again? And where are the funds coming from to support this? Fresh air tokens, anyone? Jackasses. You might want to listen rather close to this one. Because we're not all about exposing things, but also about solutions. And last week I mentioned about a mortgage plan. And here is a rough idea of how I have formulated it. Although with algorithm machines, it can be modified accordingly based on defined percentages calculated. So, we will start with an average priced home in most regions for this example. And with the background of 30 to 40% of people homes going into foreclosure this year. So we're going to start with a home for $350,000, which you bought with 10% down. So if you need a pen and paper, go and get it quick. So with a $350,000 home with 10% down leaves you with a mortgage of $315,000. So for the example, after paying for a period of 8 years, the principal balance is now around $270,000. And your payment with an interest rate of 4.5%, which is kind of average, is currently $1,598 per month. But you're struggling to make the payments. And your home is underwater and is now only worth $250,000 or $260,000. It may be less. Which is market value and not true value. And so you are now in danger of foreclosure, which is costly and often prevents you owning a home again for a while, 7 years I think it is, pushing you into a rental market with overinflated prices like the average in New York mentioned last week of $3,620 a month as an example. But the true cost of your home is around $175,000, not $250,000 or the $350,000 you paid for it. And this is where the trust can come in. So a refinance of the home from the $270,000 owed on the mortgage down to $175,000 and a new loan of 30 years with an interest rate of 2% renders your new mortgage payment now at $645 a month. The trust then pays the remaining balance to the banks with a deal that does not require to pay the full $95,000 that is reduced with this example, less say 10% admin fees as an example. So the trust has paid 95 less than 9,500, so basically 85,500 goes to the bank. This then has a number of benefits. 1. It floats the banks. 2. This then lowers the mortgage payments and keeps people in their homes. 3. This begins the reduction of house prices so all people can afford one and end the mobile home living scandal. 4. It keeps people out of the courts and legal fees that comes with foreclosure. 5. It increases the inflow of taxes on homes as more homes are populated and affordable, which helps the county's finances. 6. With more people paying property taxes due to affordable homes and hundreds of thousands of homes not sitting empty, this will then reduce everyone's property taxes. 7. It improves people's credit rating. 8. It improves people's stress levels and lifestyles. And 9. This will ensure the proposed TPC villages does not have an adverse effect on the local market prices. Initially, in the near term, it would have an adverse effect on the housing markets. But to counter that and prevent misuse of this new programme, here are some stipulations that should apply to these new financed homes. 1. The price of that new financed home remains permanently at $175,000 plus inflation added on each year, or goes down if inflation rates are lower. 2. The home becomes a designated trust-named home to determine the new home as a separate entity and now not rated anymore at market value. 3. The mortgage loanee must stay with the trust loan for the duration of the mortgage. That way the trust gets back their investment on reducing the cost of your homes. 4. The lowering of the mortgage from $270,000 to $175,000 should not be classed as a taxable income item. The payments were fraud to begin with, and if the IRS wishes to gain from it, they should seek out those taxes from the lender, given they were paid for the loan up front anyway. 5. Given the savings costs of going from a monthly payment of $1,598 down to $645, and people have more money in their pockets, perhaps a savings scheme of, say, $100 per month with the bank the mortgage was financed with becomes part of the package, which stays in the account until that savings account reaches the level of the deposit you paid down originally when you bought the home, which in this case was $35,000, which leaves you with a nest egg at the end of the mortgage, which is then something extra to leave to the children or the grandchildren. 6. This then encourages savings again, which is lacking badly within the Western world. 7. The flow of money is increased amongst the people and not all of it harvested by the banks. 8. People would have more money to spend, which aids all of the economy and creates more jobs, many of which were lost due to this fake scandemic. 9. It ends the marketing snake oil people plans of boom and bust that would envelop everybody should their system carry on as currently. I said in June last year, the millionaire people would be harvested and run down. They have, as evidenced in recent shows, and no one is safe in their homes anymore financially. This would make a massive change to this country on all levels, and everyone gains from it: the banks, the trust, and the people. And it hopefully puts an end to the home-based class status and runaway borrowing costs of keeping up with the Joneses. A home is something to live in and protect you from the elements, intruders, and critters. It should never be a class-based item. It is a basic requirement for living. The trust for another of their favour programs needs to acquire land for new towns and TPC villages to spring up. There is a vast quantities of open land available in America to build upon and end this practice of condensing people into overpopulated cities or towns, and also move people away from coastal areas that are consistently plagued and ruined by storms. That way we can demolition vast quantities of high-rise buildings and derelict subdivisions in the towns and cities and return them to nature and make all our cities and towns better and less resembling concrete jungles. When completed, then we can all get by with just a little help from our friends. Right. Just when you thought you'd heard it all, we're going to go deep into a topic that's really covered. And you may get triggered. We will provide support. And I've attempted to write about and cover this subject for quite a while now, but always put it off for more appealing stories. But this time I'm going to do it. And it's one of the great hidden subjects that too few are aware of, and even less will mention or cover it. There are many reasons it doesn't come up in any conversations or is covered too much in the alt media either. People will speak of this in very small circles and rarely in the public realm of social media or otherwise. This topic is ultra sensitive to those who have experienced it. And so I've put a team in place to help the people who have undergone this issue and then mention it anywhere. We'll have more details of that later. This topic is about astral rape in both dream time and experienced in the physical and awake. So what is it all about? Why is it not covered? Where are the books on it? Why will the medical profession not discuss it? Is it real? and a plethora of other questions arise for the victims. So what does it entail? Well, it involves all the same aspects of a physical rape, except you cannot see the perpetrator. It is terrifying as the person feels all the same sensations and yet cannot see the person or entity who is doing it. Once the event is over is when the real issues start. The physical emotion of rape is bad enough, but then a new reality kicks in and the questions come thick and fast for the victimized. Who do you speak to about this? Your partner? Your family? Your doctor? The police? Your male partner is going to think you've been unfaithful. Are you nuts? Explained away as a bad dream. Your family also. Asking, are you working too hard or stressed? Are you taking meds? Are you on drugs or something? Is the general line of questioning. And as for getting so far as telling your doctor, that is fraught with double dangers, as that profession is missing key components to any full, true or valid prognosis. Taught by the book, a book replete with zero knowledge of how to deal with this or mental issues, beyond the drug-pushing ideology they're all too and so keen to promote. The doctor is a loaded gun option, as their levels of knowledge of this is by and large zero. So what happened? I was raped. Did you get a good look at the person raping you? No, I couldn't see anyone. The quizzical looks you would get in return to just that exchange is enough to put anyone off. And then the same questions. Have you been sleeping? Have you been drinking? Are you on drugs? What meds are you on? How is your partner and your love life? And all the usual bullshittery the normal world uses to explain the unexplainable in a rational way. There is nothing normal or rational to astral rape. Your doctor is just going to recommend pills unless you get agitated, and then the likelihood is you are whisked off into a mental facility and a world of frustration as no one is believing you. This leads to your self-esteem plummeting, sends your mind spiraling, and eventually the person often buckles under the weight of the pressure from a disbelieving world and then begins to doubt themselves and mistrust their own experiences. And some then just agree they were making it up or was just confused, because society refuses to believe them and ultimately leads the person into mass depression, and their sex life with their partner suffers greatly also. Just where do the victims of this awful act go to? No one believes them. Due to the chronic lack of knowledge in and of the hidden world, be it of magic, the spirit world, the dimensional world, extraterrestrials, or by and large the earth-based planes. The so-called experts in medical or psychology departments can't help them. It must be just about the most horrible experience, and it is a life-changing event, and yet the world discounts it all. because of the control system and the fear-based religious world we inhabit. The church won't help them either, as the pretext of the church is a dance in and of the dark. And people can argue different, but the evidence against that now is overwhelming, providing you see and think clearly without the overbearing fear program that fake avenue of spirituality brings. So, what does this entail? The victim is often lying in bed in a semi or unconscious state when the bed starts moving, and the first thought is often, is it their partner getting over amorous with them? Once fully awake, that thought process quickly turns to panic and horror. Often they cannot move or speak, leading to increased panic about what is unfolding in front of them. They lie motionless, unable to do anything to stop the event, praying it's just a bad dream and trying desperately to wake up, only the longevity of the event and the sensations in the genital area deem that a pointless exercise, and the victim's mentally and physical torture goes on. What do they feel? They feel all the same sensations of the penetrating act as experienced with their partner or former partners, although often this experience is of a more brutal and forceful act than general lovemaking. Is this just a female victim event? No. Males have experienced it also with general rape and also buggery rape, and they are less able to speak about it than females. I have been a witness to this type of event, and yes, it is all too real. But being familiar to the hidden world that operates just out of most people's range of sight, it was easier for me to embrace this reality and try and help the person suffering. Often people who experience it essentially end up alone and lonely, as they no longer feel the world or people are beneficial to them, following the world of disbelievers, creating an almost bubble world of reality for them. This often leads the victims to withdraw from society in many aspects, and an insular world all too uncomfortable. And this is kind of similar to many who listen to this and other alt media shows, where we attempt to teach a disbelieving world of reality, and we are or were all too brutally dismissed. The difference is we can easily mend our rejection and go within and find like-minded individuals to engage, but not so for the astral rape victims. As nowhere do people cover this in any great detail, or without some level of dismissiveness. We at THI have often approached and covered the difficult aspects of life and have engaged people on a different level, provided a safe environment for people to come and speak of their shortfalls, wrongdoing, lifestyle, experiences of a more esoteric nature, and many other topics. And this is the essence of THI. If you feel or have been a victim of this crime, please feel free when ready to do so and come and speak to us. If you are female and don't wish me to speak to me out of embarrassment, that is fine, as we have Holly and Michelle to engage you on that level. I would like to set up a monthly Zoom call for self-help issues if we receive sufficient feedback to do so, which I will attend with Michelle, Holly and Ramona. Don't be afraid to come forward. Come into the light and cast out the darkness. This song, while fitting lyrically, may also be a trigger. But no, THI is and always will be here to support you. Final piece tonight. What is value? Have we defined it? Does our modern day world reflect true value? It is worth what people are prepared to pay is often the same. But that is not true value, is it? As our mortgage plan revealed earlier. Do we value the self enough? Do we value life force energy? Do we know what our life force energy is all about? Have we defined it? Your life force energy is the most precious commodity bar none in this universe. For proof of that, watch Jupiter ascending. Yes, that's essence of us in the little jars. Pieces of paper with numbers on are a poor substitute for your life force energy. A full understanding of that will send you towards a better life path. A society that does not honour or deem necessary true values and instead uses the term market value is always destined to fail. It did, and we have. Modern day values is skewed beyond all reasonable excuses now, and to get to a society where all gain and participate, a true value of life, creativity, consciousness and spirituality needs to be attained and achieved by all the people going forward. It has to become our goals in life for the future. This world is an abomination currently, riddled with corruption, perverse thinking patterns, greed, envy, anger, bitterness and unbalanced mindsets based on harvesting it all and not sharing it all. This is the vision laid out by THI for our future, where radical changes of people, thinking, lifestyles, manners, engagement, government and cultures have to be made to ensure a real future for the people and this planet. Now the first step to that, many of you listening have already made. THI has been the change, not waiting for it. But the next stage I need you all to ponder on is, what is and of value, and what is and not of value currently. And then, how do we change that to a true value in life across all the different or differing spectrums of life and living? This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.